The moment Dean Halvorson opened our final project, the lecture theater went so silent I could hear the projector fan scraping against its bearings. A white page filled the screen. No title.
No graphs.
No executive summary. Not even the university crest that Celeste had spent 20 minutes choosing because she said the shade of blue needed to look expensive. Just a blinking cursor in the top left corner and 400 students watching my former teammates discover, in real time, that they had submitted absolutely nothing. Celeste's smile froze. Owen stopped breathing. Mason leaned toward the laptop, as if the words might appear if he intimidated the screen hard enough. Then Celeste did exactly what she had done in my first life.
She pointed at me.
Mara removed everything. A ripple moved through the theater. Heads turned. Phones lifted. Professor Sloane stared at me from the front row, his expression sharpened by disbelief. Dean Halvorson slowly lowered his glasses. I remained seated with my hands folded over my notebook. No, I said. I removed my name. Celeste's face changed. That was the instant she realized those were not the same thing. 3 weeks earlier, I had died with my student identification card in my coat pocket and an academic misconduct ruling open on my phone. I remembered the rain first. It struck the windscreen in silver ropes while I sat in the passenger seat of a rideshare, reading the final sentence again and again. The committee finds that Ms. Mara Ellison bears primary responsibility for the unauthorized material contained within the group submission. Primary responsibility. Not Celeste, who had purchased the stolen market analysis. Not Owen, who had replaced my verified data with fabricated numbers because the real results were too boring. Not Mason, who had uploaded the file through my account after asking to borrow my laptop charger and secretly ticking the declaration box beside my name.
Me.
I had carried the project for 12 weeks. I had scheduled every meeting, cleaned every dataset, redrawn every figure, and written every section they were too busy to touch. Then, 40 minutes before submission, they had replaced my work with material copied from a consultancy report and made sure the digital trail ended at my login. When I protested, Celeste cried. She was excellent at crying. Her eyes reddened without swelling, her voice shook without becoming ugly, and one tear always arrived at exactly the correct moment. She told the panel I had been controlling. She said I refused to let anyone see the final file. Owen produced edited screenshots. Mason swore I had threatened them. Professor Sloane, who had praised me all semester, stopped meeting my eyes. My scholarship was canceled. My internship offer vanished. My mother, already recovering from surgery, tried to sell the little jewelry she had left from my grandmother to pay the tuition debt I suddenly owed. That night, inside the rideshare, I had finally understood the shape of my future. Every door I had worked toward had closed because 3 people knew I would rather exhaust myself than disappoint a team. The traffic light changed. The driver moved forward. A delivery truck skidded through the intersection. There was a horn, a burst of white, and then nothing. When I opened my eyes again, Celeste was snapping her fingers in front of my face. Mara, are you listening? I was sitting in seminar room 4B. Sunlight lay across the table. My untouched coffee steamed beside my laptop. On the wall, the digital calendar read Monday, September 8th, 12 weeks before the submission. For several seconds, I could only stare at Celeste's hand. Same pearl manicure. Same thin gold bracelet. Same tiny scar beside her thumb from a childhood accident she had once described during a meeting she skipped halfway through. Owen was spinning a pen between his fingers. Mason was scrolling through football scores. Professor Sloane stood at the front of the room, assigning groups for the university's National Strategy Challenge. I knew every word he was about to say. This project is worth 60% of your final grade. The top team will present directly to the dean and representatives from Bracken Consulting. Treat your group agreement as a professional contract. In my first life, I had heard opportunity. This time, I heard a warning. Professor Sloane handed us the group charter. Celeste immediately pushed it toward me. You're organized, she said brightly. You can fill this out for us. In my first life, I had smiled and accepted the pen. In this life, I slid the paper back. We'll fill it out together. Mason finally looked up. Owen's pen stopped spinning. It was a tiny refusal, almost invisible, but the air changed. People like Celeste did not fear confrontation. They feared a service they had already assumed would be free, suddenly developing boundaries. She laughed as though I had made a joke. Of course. I just meant you have nice handwriting. My handwriting won't make your commitments binding. Her smile thinned. We agreed to divide the project into 4 equal work streams. I insisted each person list measurable deliverables, weekly deadlines, and ownership of source material. I also asked Professor Sloan to witness the document. He raised an eyebrow but signed it. Celeste watched me the entire time. After the meeting, she linked her arm through mine in the corridor. "Are you okay?" she asked. "You seem intense today." I looked at her hand resting on my sleeve and remembered that same hand sliding a box of tissues toward me during the misconduct hearing. "You should just admit it, Mara. They might be lenient if you stop making this worse." I gently removed her arm. "I'm better than I've ever been." That was true. The dead have very little left to fear. I did not begin my second life by plotting revenge. Revenge is what people imagine when they have never been betrayed by someone who knows their routines. It sounds dramatic. Secret recordings, elaborate traps, a perfect speech delivered beneath harsh lights. Real betrayal is quieter. It is discovering that the people beside you have built their comfort from your predictability. They know you will fix the mistake. They know you will stay late. They know you will accept an apology, because the deadline matters more than your anger. So, I did not need a trap. I only needed to stop rescuing them. At our first scheduled meeting, Celeste arrived 35 minutes late carrying an iced drink and an apology shaped like a compliment. "You're honestly a lifesaver for starting without me." "I haven't started your section," I said. Her chair paused halfway from the table. Owen missed the meeting entirely. Mason attended through video call with his camera off and contributed one sentence. "Whatever you guys think is best." In my first life, I had transformed that disaster into progress. I had taken minutes, allocated follow-up tasks, summarized the research question, and sent everyone a polished action list before midnight. This time, I opened the charter. "Celeste, your consumer analysis is due Friday at 5. Owen's dataset is due at the same time. Mason's competitor review is due Sunday. I'll complete the policy section. Meeting notes are rotating, and today is Mason's turn." Silence came through the speaker. "Wait," Mason said. "I'm on my phone." "You agreed to the rotation. Can't you just do it this once?" I smiled at the black square containing his initials.
No.
Celeste stirred her drink. Ice clicked against plastic. "Mara, we don't need to be corporate about everything. We're competing for a consulting placement. Corporate seems appropriate." She studied me as if trying to locate the old version of me behind my face. That evening, Mason uploaded meeting notes consisting of 6 bullet points, 2 of which were jokes about Owen. I saved the file exactly as it was. I did not rewrite it. I did not correct the spelling. I did not quietly perform the labor he would later claim had been shared. On Friday at 4:58 p.m., my policy section appeared in the shared drive with 22 academic sources, a methods appendix, and a version history attached. At 5, Celeste uploaded nothing. At 5:17, she sent a message. "Emergency with my aunt. I'll finish tomorrow, promise." In my first life, the emergency had been a rooftop birthday party. I knew because she had accidentally posted a photograph before hiding her story from me. This time, I replied in the group chat. "I'm sorry to hear that. I've recorded the extension request. Please upload by noon tomorrow and include the raw survey notes required by the charter." The typing indicator appeared, vanished, then appeared again. "Why are you recording it?" "For our contribution log." She reacted with a thumbs up that looked more threatening than any insult. Owen uploaded a spreadsheet at 11:46 p.m. It contained 3 tabs, all copied from the example file Professor Sloan had provided. He had changed the company names, but not the numbers. In the final row, the example's fictional brand, North Star Foods, was still visible. My hands went cold when I saw it. In my first life, that spreadsheet had arrived during the final week. I had spent 2 nights rebuilding the analysis from raw public data. Owen had then presented the results as his own, calling himself the numbers guy, while I advanced his slides from the side of the stage. I opened the group chat. Owen, this is the example dataset with labels changed. It cannot be used. Please upload your original data and collection method by Monday at 9. He answered immediately. Relax. It's a placeholder. Then label it as a placeholder. You knew what it was. The assessor may not. A private message arrived seconds later. You're making me look bad in front of everyone. I stared at the sentence for a long time. That was the language of people who believed exposure created the flaw.
Not the copying.
Not the lie. The fact that someone had described it accurately. I replied, your work is visible exactly as you submitted it. Then I took a screenshot and placed it in a folder on my personal drive called Lighthouse. That folder became the spine of my second life. Every missed deadline went into it. Every altered file, deleted comment, contradictory message, and version history entry. I exported meeting chats before anyone could erase them. I emailed weekly contribution summaries to the group and copied Professor Sloan, phrasing each one without accusation. Completed this week. Mara, policy framework and source audit. Celeste, extension pending. Owen, placeholder file pending replacement. Mason, meeting notes received. Competitor review pending. The first summary earned me a private visit from Celeste. She found me outside the library beneath a row of windows turning orange with sunset. She did not bother smiling. You copied Sloan into our internal business. The charter requires weekly reporting. No one actually does that.
Ido.
You're acting like you expect us to fail. The strange thing was that she sounded hurt, not because I distrusted her, but because distrust reduced her control. I expect each person to complete what they sign their name beside. She stepped closer. Groups don't work when one person keeps score. Groups also don't work when one person does all the work. Her eyes flickered. It was only a fraction of a second, but I saw recognition. We had not yet reached the weeks when I carried them. I had not yet complained. There was no innocent reason for that sentence to frighten her. She recovered quickly. Nobody asked you to do everything. Good, I said. Then we understand each other. As she walked away, her reflection moved beside her in the darkening glass. For one impossible moment, I saw the Celeste from my first life. Black blazer, trembling mouth, carefully manufactured tears. Then the image was gone. My phone buzzed. Professor Sloan had replied to the weekly summary. Thank you for maintaining clear records. Continue. One word.
Continue.
I read it twice, because in my first life he had said something very different. Why didn't you document any of this earlier? This time I would. By the 4th week, my teammates had discovered that boundaries are exhausting when you are accustomed to stepping over someone. Owen replaced his example spreadsheet with numbers he claimed came from a survey of 800 respondents. He could not produce the survey link, consent statement, or raw responses. Mason submitted a competitor review containing paragraphs copied from company websites, including one sentence that still said, "Click here to learn more." Celeste uploaded a beautifully formatted consumer profile built around 6 interviews she had never conducted. I did not repair any of it. I marked each section with comments, cited the relevant assessment criteria, and gave them a deadline to correct it. Then I continued building my own work stream inside a separate research notebook linked to the team's master document. The system was called Hive. Every student hated it. Hive did not store a project as one ordinary file. It created a shell containing live modules owned by individual contributors. A chart might appear inside the master document while its data remained in Owen's module. A written section might display from Celeste's page. The final submission converted every authorized module into one locked package. In our charter, each member had agreed to own and maintain her or his assigned modules. I owned the policy framework, methodology audit, and final synthesis. I also had administrative access because I had created the shell during our first meeting. In my first life, that convenience destroyed me. Everyone sent unfinished scraps directly to me, and I rebuilt them inside modules registered under my account. By submission day, 92% of the project history carried my name. When the stolen material appeared, the committee saw a simple story: my account, my file, my responsibility. This time, I created nothing for anyone else. When Owen asked me to just upload his data because Hive kept rejecting it, I offered to screen record a tutorial. He declined. When Mason emailed his section as an attachment and told me to paste it in, I replied that he needed to upload it through his own module so authorship remained accurate. He called me difficult in the group chat, then deleted the message. Lighthouse kept the export. Celeste used a softer strategy. She waited until I was leaving an evening lecture, then approached me with 2 coffees and the careful expression of someone offering peace. "I hate how weird this has become," she said. I kept walking. "Which part?" "All the tracking. The emails. Everyone feels like you're building a case against us." She handed me a coffee. I did not drink it. "If completing your assigned work would weaken my case, perhaps you should try that." She gave a small laugh, but there was no amusement in it.
See? That.
"You never used to talk like this." My steps slowed. People often say they miss the old you when they mean they miss the access they had to you. Hearing it from Celeste was like touching the scar from an injury my new body did not possess. "What was I like before?" I asked. "Kind." The word struck harder than an insult. In my first life, kindness had meant allowing her to arrive late. Kindness had meant answering messages at 2 in the morning. Kindness had meant lending her my notes, writing her speaking cards, and standing outside the bathroom before presentations while she claimed panic attacks that vanished whenever networking drinks began. "No," I said. "I was useful." She stopped walking. I left the coffee on a windowsill. The following morning, a rumor spread through our cohort that I was trying to have my teammates expelled. Nobody said Celeste had started it. They did not need to. Her accusations traveled through other people, softened into concern. Mara records private conversations. Mara is obsessed with contribution percentages. Mara thinks the placement belongs to her. A student I barely knew asked whether I was doing okay mentally. Another advised me to be more collaborative if I wanted to work in consulting. When I entered the cafeteria, conversations did not stop, but they changed shape. In my first life, that would have broken me. I would have rushed to explain myself, producing so many details that my desperation became evidence against me. This time, I ate lunch with Nia Torres. Nia sat 2 rows behind me in statistics and spoke with the unhurried precision of someone who had never needed silence to mean agreement. She had watched our group from a distance for weeks. "You know Celeste is telling people you plan to delete the project before submission," she said. I nearly dropped my fork. That accusation had not appeared until after the submission in my first life. Celeste had claimed I threatened to erase everything if the group challenged my leadership. Now she was planting it early. "Who told you?" 3 people. All with slightly different wording, which means the wording came from one person who didn't want to be quoted. Nia opened a yogurt. "Are you planning to delete it?"
No.
"Then don't." I wasn't going to.
Good.
Let them build the trap and stand somewhere else when it closes. I looked at her. She shrugged. My older sister went through a group misconduct case. Everyone focused on proving who was lying. The appeal panel only cared about what could be verified. That sentence altered my plan. Until then, Lighthouse had been defensive. A shelter against what I knew was coming. But evidence was not only protection. Properly placed, it could become a road no lie could cross. That afternoon, I requested a formal contribution review under the assessment policy. I attached the charter, weekly summaries, module histories, and copies of the incomplete work. I asked Professor Sloan to evaluate whether I could submit my components independently if the group failed to meet its obligations. I did not accuse anyone of conspiracy. I did not mention my first life. I did not predict plagiarism. I wrote one sentence at the end. I am concerned that continued administrative ownership of the group shell may inaccurately assign responsibility for material I did not create or approve. Professor Sloan did not reply that day, or the next. On Thursday morning, an appointment appeared on my calendar. Contribution review. Professor Sloan and Dean Halvorson. My pulse lurched when I saw the dean's name. In my first life, I had met him only once, across a polished table during my final appeal. He had listened without cruelty, which somehow made the ruling worse. I entered his office carrying a printed copy of Lighthouse and found Celeste already seated inside. She was crying. Celeste's tears were already shining when Professor Sloan closed the door. "I didn't want this to become formal," she whispered. "I just want us to finish the project as friends." Dean Halvorson gestured toward the empty chair opposite him. "Sit down, Ms. Ellison." The room smelled of old paper and lemon polish. On the wall behind him hung a framed photograph of the university's first graduating class. I remembered staring at those same solemn faces while my appeal collapsed. My body knew the room before my mind could reassure it. My palms dampened. My hearing narrowed. For one awful second, I was back in my first life with a canceled scholarship letter folded inside my bag. Then I noticed the date stamped on the folder before the dean. October, not December. This was not the same meeting.
Iset.
Professor Sloan explained that Celeste had requested to attend after learning about my contribution review. She had submitted a statement claiming my record-keeping created a hostile environment and that I had retained excessive control over the hive shell. "Is that accurate?" the dean asked. "I created the shell because the group asked me to," I said. "Administrative ownership can be transferred at any time. I requested this review because I no longer want ownership of other members' modules attributed to me." Celeste pressed a tissue beneath one eye. "That makes it sound like we've done something wrong." I said your work should carry your names. You know Hive is confusing. That is why I offered tutorials. You offered to record us struggling. I offered to record my screen. Her mouth tightened. Dean Halvorson opened the Lighthouse binder. He moved through the weekly summaries without speaking. Then he turned to Celeste. "Your consumer analysis was due September 12th? My aunt had an emergency. I am not asking why it was late. When was it completed?" Celeste looked at Professor Sloan. "I'm still refining the interviews." "Have the interviews occurred?" "They're scheduled." The dean turned another page. "Your module states they were completed with 6 consumers." Color rose beneath her makeup. "That was future tense," she said. I almost laughed. The sentence in her module began, "We interviewed 6 consumers and discovered." Dean Halvorson did not laugh. "Words have tense, Miss Hart. Accountability has dates." For the first time, her tears stopped helping. Owen and Mason were called into the meeting through video. Owen blamed technical problems. Mason said he thought the competitor review was only a draft. Each explanation contradicted a message preserved in Lighthouse. I did not interrupt. I did not expose every lie. I let the dean ask simple questions and watched complexity become their enemy. At last, he closed the binder. "This is not yet a misconduct matter," he said. "It is a project management failure. I am establishing a mandatory checkpoint 10 days from now. Each member will demonstrate original work within his or her assigned Hive modules. Ms. Ellison, after that checkpoint, you may request independent assessment if the contribution imbalance remains substantial." Celeste inhaled sharply. "Independent assessment? She can leave us, if the evidence supports it. But her synthesis connects everything." Dean Halvorson looked at her over his glasses. "Then I suggest you give her something worth synthesizing." The door slammed behind us, and the crying disappeared so completely it was almost impressive. "You humiliated me." I answered questions. "You brought a binder. You brought tears." Her expression snapped. For 1 second, the mask left her face entirely. There was no injured friend, no overwhelmed student, no gracious team leader. Only calculation, furious because it had failed. "You think Sloan will let you present alone?" she said. "The challenge requires a team. The assessment policy allows individual work. The placement doesn't." There it was. Not the grade. Not fairness. The placement at Bracken Consulting. In my first life, Celeste had joined the firm using our winning project, while I watched the announcement from an academic integrity waiting room. "You can keep the placement," I said. Suspicion replaced anger. "What?" "I would rather keep my name." I opened the stairwell door. She caught my wrist. Her grip was hard enough to hurt. "You don't get to act superior after using us to reach the final." I looked down at her fingers until she released me. "We haven't reached the final." That afternoon, Professor Sloan announced that our preliminary policy framework had received the highest score in the cohort. Because my module was the only completed component, the score was provisional. The team would remain eligible for the dean's presentation only if the mandatory checkpoint demonstrated balanced progress. My teammates changed tactics immediately. Owen became charming. He sent memes, apologized for being defensive, and asked whether we could reset. Mason volunteered to take meeting notes. Celeste created a new group chat called Phoenix Team, complete with a flame emoji and a message about rising together. I answered every practical question and ignored every performance of friendship. For 6 days, they appeared to work. Then I found the consultancy report. It happened at 2 in the morning while I was checking a citation in Mason's module. One sentence described a retailer's strategic whitespace opportunity, a phrase too polished for the paragraph surrounding it. I searched the wording and found a Bracken Consulting report published 3 years earlier. Mason had copied 2 pages. I checked Owen's revised analysis. His graphs matched the same report, with colors changed and labels rearranged. Celeste's new consumer profiles repeated observations from its appendix. They were not merely copying a source. They were copying the firm judging the competition. A message appeared in the group chat while I stared at the screen. "Celeste, final push tomorrow. Mara, please combine everything before checkpoint so it looks consistent." My fingers hovered over the keyboard. In my first life, this was where I saved them. I rewrote the stolen material, rebuilt the graphs, and produced a clean project. Later, they restored the copied version before submission and made me responsible. This time, I typed 3 words. "I will not." Owen replied with a laughing emoji. Celeste called me. I declined. She called again. I declined again. Then Mason sent a private message. "Stop being dramatic.
Just clean it like last time."
I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Like last time. There had been no last time in this life. I did not answer Mason. I exported the message, added it to Lighthouse, and slept for exactly 40 minutes. At the mandatory checkpoint, each student had to open a module and explain the origin of every source. Owen went first. He spoke confidently until Professor Sloan asked why his sample size changed from 800 to 612 between 2 graphs. Owen blamed a filter. When asked to demonstrate it, he opened a menu and stared at options he had never used. Mason followed. The phrase "strategic whitespace opportunity" appeared on his second page. Professor Sloan leaned forward. "Define that in the context of your analysis." Mason glanced at me. That glance told me everything. He was not searching for an answer. He was waiting for me to provide one. I kept my mouth closed. Celeste's presentation lasted less than 3 minutes. Dean Halvorson asked to see her interview consent forms. She said they were stored on another device. He asked for the dates of the interviews. She named 2 evenings when her public photographs placed her at restaurants across the city. Then it was my turn. I opened my methodology module, displayed the source register, and demonstrated every transformation from raw information to final recommendation. I showed timestamps, archived links, change logs, and written permissions. Professor Sloan asked 6 questions. I answered all 6. Dean Halvorson folded his hands. "Ms. Ellison, do you wish to request independent assessment?" Celeste whispered, "Mara, don't." Her voice sounded small enough to awaken every instinct that had once controlled me. "Fix it. Protect the team. Avoid the scene. Be the reasonable woman in the room." Then I remembered my mother holding my grandmother's bracelet beneath a pawnshop light. "Yes," I said. Professor Sloan transferred my modules into a new individual shell. The dean witnessed the action. Hive generated a separation certificate listing the exact material I owned, the exact time it moved, and the exact state of the group project at departure. The certificate contained a devastating fact. Without my modules, the team shell held 9 pages. 7 were empty templates. 1 was the charter. The last contained copied material that Professor Sloan immediately quarantined. I removed my name from the team file. I did not delete a word they had written. I did not erase a graph they had created. I simply stopped lending my identity to a container they had never filled. The shell remained in Celeste's administrative control. A notice appeared before she accepted ownership. You are responsible for verifying all included content before submission. She clicked accept without reading it. After the meeting, Mason waited beside the lift. Celeste and Owen had gone ahead, arguing about who should rebuild which section. Mason stood with his hands in his pockets, his face pale beneath the fluorescent lights. "You remember," I said. His eyes closed. The lift arrived. Neither of us entered. "How?" he asked. I asked first. For several seconds, the only sound was the lift doors opening and closing on an empty car. Mason finally looked at me. I woke up in August, a month before I had. He remembered the first timeline. He remembered the misconduct hearing, my expulsion, and the placement Celeste and Owen received. He also remembered what came afterward. Bracken Consulting discovered the copied report 6 months later. Celeste blamed Owen. Owen blamed Mason. The firm terminated all 3 and referred the matter back to the university. "Celeste had screenshots showing you gave us access," he said. "She said if we kept the same story, the university couldn't punish us twice. But they did." He nodded. "My father found out. I lost everything." There was a hollow quality in his voice, but I felt no pity. He had been given another life and used the extra time to rebuild the same lie more carefully. "You could have told the truth," I said. "I thought if the project won cleanly this time, none of that would happen." "So, you copied the same report. We needed your sections to disguise it." His honesty arrived only after failure, ugly and incomplete. "Why send that message?" I asked. He rubbed both hands over his face. "I was tired. I forgot which version of you I was talking to." A laugh escaped me. It was not amusement. It was the sound a locked door might make when the frame finally split. "Which version did you expect?" "The one who fixed things." The lift returned. This time, I stepped inside. Mason placed his hand between the doors. "They're going to submit the shell. Then tell them it's empty. They won't believe me. Celeste thinks you made a second copy and that you'll put everything back at the last minute. She says you care too much about winning." The doors pressed against his hand and retreated. "Do you want me to warn them?" I asked. He looked relieved. "No," I said before he could answer. "I wanted to see whether you still expected me to save you." I pressed the close button. For the next 2 weeks, I worked alone. The silence was strange at first. No emergency messages. No false praise. No unfinished attachments arriving at midnight. I had expected independence to feel heavier, but my workload became almost gentle once I stopped carrying 3 people who kept climbing onto my back. Nia reviewed my presentation and challenged every week transition. My mother listened while cooking dinner and interrupted whenever I used language no ordinary person would understand. Professor Sloan approved a narrowed scope so my individual project could be assessed fairly. I changed the central recommendation entirely. In my first life, our project proposed an aggressive expansion strategy for a struggling regional grocery cooperative. This time, I examined why expansion would deepen its losses and designed a community ownership model based on transparent local data. It was less glamorous, more defensible, and mine. Meanwhile, the Phoenix team chat became increasingly frantic. "Celeste, Mara, we need the latest synthesis template. Owen, at least send the clean dataset. You already did it once. Mason, open the shell before you submit anything. Celeste, stop panicking. She has backups." I did not respond. 3 days before the final, Celeste cornered me in the women's bathroom. "You've made your point," she said. "Put the modules back."
No.
The dean expects a full project. Then produce one. You know we don't have time. You had 10 weeks. She moved between me and the door. You think this makes you strong? Abandoning people? I looked at our reflections beneath the hard white lights. In my first life, I had stood beside her in that same mirror and practiced the opening line of our presentation until she felt confident enough to deliver it. I didn't abandon a team, I said. I left a vacancy you mistook for a person. Her face hardened. When this goes wrong, everyone will know you planned it. That's why the dean witnessed the separation. The color drained from her cheeks. She had not known. For once, I did not stay to watch her invent an answer. On presentation morning, I arrived early and sat in the 7th row. The Phoenix team was scheduled before me because Celeste had insisted that group finalists should receive priority over an individual submission. She entered wearing the black blazer from my first life. Owen carried the presentation remote. Mason followed several steps behind them, looking as though he had not slept. Celeste saw me and smiled. It was a victorious smile. For one irrational second, fear opened beneath my ribs. Perhaps she had found an old export. Perhaps Hive had restored my modules. Perhaps the universe did not care how carefully I changed my choices. Perhaps some endings were stronger than people. Then Professor Sloan took the stage and introduced Dean Halvorson. The theater filled. Representatives from Bracken Consulting sat in the front row. Students crowded the aisles. A camera streamed the presentations to another campus. Celeste walked to the lectern with calm, measured steps. Our project, she began, reimagines the future of regional retail through innovation, inclusion, and evidence. Owen clicked the remote. Dean Halvorson opened the submitted package. A white page appeared. No title.
No graphs.
No executive summary. Celeste stared at the screen, but only for a heartbeat. Then she turned and pointed directly at me. Mara removed everything. The room erupted in whispers. I stood slowly. No, I said. I removed my name. Dean Halvorson raised one hand, and the theater quieted. Miss Hart, did you verify this package before submitting it?
Yes.
Hive showed the modules. The submission receipt states that the package contains 1 active page and 8 empty templates. That's impossible. Professor Sloan connected his tablet to the projector. The separation certificate appeared, dated 2 weeks earlier and signed by the dean, the professor, and me. Beneath it was the Hive warning Celeste had accepted when she became administrator. You are responsible for verifying all included content before submission. Celeste's voice rose. She knew we would rely on her backups. Why? Dean Halvorson asked. Because she always fixes things. There it was, spoken before hundreds of witnesses. Not a defense. A confession of expectation. Owen grabbed the lectern microphone. She withheld group work. Professor Sloan displayed the ownership record. Identify one item in Ms. Ellison's independent package that you created. Owen looked at the screen. He could not. Celeste tried another direction. She claimed I had manipulated the module system. The dean displayed the audit log. She claimed I had refused to communicate. He opened the weekly summaries. She claimed the group had completed a separate project that must have failed to upload. He asked for the source file. Nobody produced one. Then Mason walked to the microphone. Celeste hissed his name, but he did not look at her. The file is blank because we left it blank, he said. Mara warned us. I warned them again before submission. Celeste said Mara would restore the work because she cared about winning, and Owen said we could blame the system if she didn't. Owen swore at him. Mason continued. The material we did upload was copied from a Bracken report. Mara did not write it, approve it, or remove it. Professor Sloan quarantined it at the checkpoint. The theater became completely still. One of the Bracken representatives closed her notebook. Celeste's composure finally shattered. Not delicately. Not with one elegant air. Her face twisted, and her voice cracked as she accused Mason, then Owen, then me. She said the project had been her idea. She said everyone copied in university. She said the dean had set them up by allowing me to leave. Each sentence destroyed the one before it. Dean Halvorson ended the presentation. The team was disqualified immediately. The copied material was referred to academic integrity, along with Mason's statement and the complete Hive record. Security did not drag anyone away. There was no theatrical punishment. Celeste simply walked down the center aisle while hundreds of people avoided her eyes. That was worse. When my name was called, my knees trembled. I walked past the blank screen, connected my own package, and saw my title appear. Growth is not rescue. A community ownership strategy for regional grocers. For the first 30 seconds, nobody moved. They were waiting for another explosion. So, I changed my opening. A blank project and a failing business can create the same temptation, I said. People rush to fill the space with whatever looks impressive. But responsible strategy begins by asking who owns the work, who carries the risk, and who benefits when the story succeeds. The room leaned toward me. I presented for 18 minutes. Halfway through, the projector briefly flickered, and my first graph disappeared. In my former life, a disruption like that would have emptied my mind. This time, I closed the laptop and drew the model by hand on the whiteboard. The audience followed every line. During questions, a Bracken partner challenged my revenue assumptions. I showed the conservative case. Another asked why I rejected rapid expansion. I answered that growth built on hidden labor was not growth, it was delayed collapse. Dean Halvorsen asked the final question. What changed your approach to accountability? I looked at the empty seats where my teammates had been. I learned that helping people avoid consequences is not the same as helping them. I did not tell him it had taken dying to understand. The judges awarded my project the highest academic score, but competition rules prevented an individual from receiving the team placement. For several minutes, disappointment pressed against me. Some losses survived even a second life. Then the Bracken partner who had questioned my assumptions approached Professor Sloan. After a quiet conversation, she offered me a separate paid research fellowship developing the community ownership model with 2 regional cooperatives. It was not a consolation prize. It was narrower, harder, and based entirely on work carrying my name. I accepted. After the theater emptied, Dean Halvorsen asked me to remain behind. Professor Sloan stood beside him, holding the lighthouse binder against his chest. The dean removed his glasses. Our systems are designed to detect copied sentences, he said. They are less effective at detecting when responsibility itself has been copied onto the most reliable person in a room. I waited. In another circumstance, we might have mistaken your silence for agreement and your competence for control. The words landed strangely. He could not apologize for a life he did not remember, yet some part of me received them for the girl who had sat in his office beneath the same framed photograph and begged to be believed. Professor Sloan placed the binder on the desk. Why did you document everything so early? Because I remembered dying, I thought. Because I knew memory would become an argument, I said. I wanted dates instead. He nodded slowly. I should have required that standard from every group, not only accepted it from the student prepared to maintain it. That acknowledgement mattered more than praise. Praise had always rewarded how much I could carry. This was the first time an authority figure recognized that the load itself had been unfair. Dean Halvorsen offered to preserve Lighthouse as evidence, but I asked for a copy when the case ended. Months later, the binder returned in a sealed box. I did not open it. I placed it on the highest shelf of my wardrobe, not as a trophy, but as proof that I no longer needed to keep every danger within reach. Nia found me in the corridor afterward and handed me the coffee Celeste had abandoned weeks earlier, or rather a fresh one from the same cafe. Thought you might finally drink it, she said. I took one sip. Is this how friendships begin? Usually with less documentation. I laughed so suddenly that students turned. The sound startled me. It belonged neither to the frightened woman from my first life, nor to the guarded one who woke in September. It belonged to someone unfinished. Nia lifted her cup. To unfinished work. To honest work, I corrected. We tapped the cups together and walked outside. Mason later received a reduced penalty because he confessed before the investigation concluded. Owen was suspended for 2 terms. Celeste fought every finding until the audit logs made denial impossible. She lost the placement she had treated as already hers. I never celebrated their punishments. That surprised me most. In my first life, I had imagined Vindication as a fire hot enough to erase what happened. In the second, it felt like setting down a weight and discovering my hands still knew how to build. On the anniversary of the crash that no longer occurred, rain silvered the city streets. I met my mother outside the cooperative chosen for the fellowship. She wore my grandmother's bracelet, the one she never needed to sell in this life. "You look happy," she said. "I'm learning." "About grocery stores?" "About names." She laughed and linked her arm through mine. Inside, my research team waited around a table covered with real surveys, signed consent forms, and pages marked by different hands. Nobody called me a lifesaver. Nobody expected me to make their work disappear into mine. Before our meeting began, I opened the shared file. Each contributor's name appeared beside what she had created. Mine was there too. Not above everyone else. Not beneath them. Not attached to their mistakes. Exactly where it belonged. In my first life, they stole my future by placing my name on work I never chose. In my second, I saved it by removing my name from the blank page they expected me to fill.